Hello and welcome to The Last Word. The BJP's Tiranga Yatra was the big story as India celebrated Republic Day earlier this week. But it was also an emotional and polarizing event that tested the objectivity and balance of the media. So today we ask, how did television channels and newspapers acquit themselves? That's with the centre's chief interlocutor and former editor of the Times of India, Dilip Padgaonkar, the well-known Telegraph and pioneer columnist Swapan Das Gupta, the executive editor of the Kashmir Times, Anuradha Bhasin Jamwal, and the BBC's Urdu service editor and author of The Collaborator, Mirza Waheed. Dilip Padgaonkar, let me start with the national coverage of the Yatra and put a simple question to you. Given how polarizing and emotive this was, did the media take sides in covering it, or was it overall fair, balanced and objective?
You've got to make a distinction between television and the print medium. I think by and large the print medium gave the entire episode the kind of place it deserved. I think the editorial comments again were extremely fair and balanced. Television on the other hand, because of the pressures of being 24/7, had a continuous coverage, carpet to carpet coverage, and that I believe is the one that also contributed to a fairly large extent to giving what you call this image of the country being polarized on this issue.
Swapan Das Gupta, to pick up on that point that Dilip made, the BJP claims that the huge crowds that gathered at Madhopur on the Punjab-Jammu border were virtually blacked out by all television channels. In addition to the blanket coverage, was there a bias against the BJP on television?
Well, I agree with what Dilip has said as far as the print medium is concerned, but as far as television is concerned, not only was a certain hysteria which was created, but again, it was also very partial. I think there was an editorial decision which a lot of the television channels took, which said that this yatra was undesirable. I mean, they're entitled to take that, but their coverage also reflected that. So there was, to a very large extent, a selective one. The more non-contentious aspects of it were not publicized to a large extent. Isolated examples of tension were exaggerated. And, we also had a little bizarre spectacle on Republic Day itself, when some slightly disturbing images of policemen crumpling the national flag and trying to arrest people were put on and then immediately withdrawn. Perhaps rightly so, but you can see that there was a certain editorial agenda which crept into the coverage.
Do you think that those particular shots should have been not shown in the first place?
Well, it's a difficult one, because if you show images of a national flag being turned upside down in some remote part of Uttar Pradesh and make a huge song and dance about it, then certainly you should be showing the fact that the guardians of law and order were slightly peremptory in their handling of the national flag.
Anuradha Jaiswal, one newspaper, at least the Pioneer, in an editorial, compared the arrest of BJP leaders and the general atmosphere to the emergency of 75. Was that a fair comparison, or was it an exaggeration?
I think it was exaggerated to a great extent. Emergency was a much bigger draconian step. I mean, this, of course, the arrests, the way the BJP leaders were arrested from the airport may not have been very justified, the way the entire, but it was, one also has to put this entire perspective, because the BJP brought the situation to that point. The government added to it with its hype, and added to that, of course, the media overhyped the issue. So that situation was created where these leaders were arrested. I think it's very unfair to compare it to the emergency days.
Okay. Mirza Waheed, there's a certain criticism expressed, I suspect, both by Dilip Padgaonkar and Swapan, that the television channels overdid it. Do you think that television channels and newspapers this time did enough to both question the BJP and its motives, as well as question the state and central government and their decision not to permit a flag hoisting in Srinagar on Republic Day? In other words, was there enough analysis of both sides?
It was in the print media, Karan. It was there in the print media. I would agree with Dilip and Swapan both. That it was there in the print media, but some sections of the electronic media did the usual what they do on Kashmir. That they sort of treated it as a thriller, with enough drama. I mean, at one point, it sort of appeared to me it was a badly made soap. On obviously not all channels, but there was analysis in the print media, both in the national sort of newspapers. And also in newspapers in Kashmir. And I must also add, in some newspapers in Srinagar, the coverage was rather fair. It was quite fair. Yeah. And they did provide a context.
I want very much to come, in fact, to the coverage within the state itself, but you therefore share the opinion of Swapan and Dilip that television did not acquit itself very well. Is that correct?
I would agree. I would agree to that.
All right, let's come then to the coverage within the state. Dilip Wadgaonkar, in Srinagar, Greater Kashmir carried both editorials and commentary that were fairly sharply critical of the BJP. Several viewed the BJP Yatra not in nationalist terms, which is how the BJP itself would have wanted to present it, but in terms of Hindu assertion. In your eyes, was that understandable and perhaps inevitable, or was it a distortion?
Well, I wouldn't go quite along what the newspapers in the valley had to say about Hindu assertion. But where I do agree with them is that the entire yatra was perceived in the valley to be an affront, because the fact that the BJP wanted to plant the flag in Lal Chowk, knowing that Lal Chowk is a hub of separatist activity, that I think rankled in the minds of a lot of people, and there I share the sentiment of the local media. But let me add one more point. In a sense, the BJP played straight into the hands of the separatists, because the separatists have been keen for the past several years to bend every nerve, to stretch every nerve, to draw attention to what's happening in the valley. Whereas, in fact, when you're looking at some kind of a political settlement in Jammu and Kashmir, you've got necessarily to take a look at the concerns, the aspirations of people in Jammu and in Ladakh.
Okay.
But Jammu and Ladakh hardly ever appear in our media.
All right, you're basically saying that the BJP played into the hands of the separatists and helped present a distorted vision. The surprising thing, Swapan Dasgupta, is that the Kashmir Times, a Jammu-based paper, was equally critical of the BJP Yatra. The paper called the Yatra a non-issue, raked up unnecessarily and irresponsibly by the BJP. Did that line from a Jammu paper surprise you?
No, well, every paper has their own editorial positions, but what did surprise me is that how little questioning there was of the fact that what could have been a purely nominal and symbolic flag hoisting, with Jammu as the main focal point on the 25th, which to my understanding was I wouldn't use the term which Mehbooba has used, which is she called it match fixing. But I think there was an understanding between a section of the BJP and the central government that this yatra would go have a grand rally in Jammu on the 25th, and on the 26th there would be some sort of a flag hoisting at a place which may not have been Lal Chowk.
The BJP, for instance, has never pointed out, or the hardcore Hindu right-wing other parties have never pointed out the denial of democratic space within Kashmir. The BJP never even squeaks when the democratic rights of Kashmiris are snatched. So when you try to assert or try to Indianize them with symbols of Indian nation, like a national flag or a national song, so I don't think it's very justified.
Okay, picking up on that point, in fact, Mirza Wahid, I want to quote a Kashmir Times leader. The paper said that if the BJP had protested about a denial of democratic space, the alienated masses in Kashmir would have joined the campaign. In other words, if the BJP wants to capture the attention of Kashmiris and thus bring them within the mainstream, it has to do so in terms of issues that matter to Kashmiris. Would you accept that?
No, Kashmiris would not join the campaign. But what I would say is this, that if the BJP had chosen to demonstrate some moral courage and visit and express condolences with the families of the boys killed in this bloody summer we had a few months ago, some Kashmiris might have taken notice, including me. Because you know the whole flag hoisting was actually not seen with much interest by people in Kashmir. I was talking to a few friends, and all of them had this wry smile when you mentioned the flag hoisting, because it doesn't interest them at all, because they don't see it as significant in the least.
Okay, let's take a break at that point. Let's come back and ask a wider question. How adequately does the media cover Kashmir, or does it do so in narrow terms of black and white? Because in a real sense, that is what matters, not just to us in India, but in particular to the people in the valley. We'll be back in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to The Last Word. We're discussing the media and Jammu and Kashmir. Mirza Waheed, does the national media understand the complexity of the situation in Kashmir, or does it see it in narrow black and white terms, in terms of India versus Pakistan, accession versus separatism, or the army versus the Armed Forces Special Powers Act?
It is beginning to change, Karan, in small but good sort of measure. You know, in the 90s, you looked at the national media and the newspapers in the evening or the next day, and you saw a thriller or a crime story reported, and you were a young person and you would wonder, okay, I have witnessed and I am witnessed a tragedy every day, and what I see on TV is a crime story. That has changed, which is a good thing. However, it's not changed across the entire spectrum of the electronic media, of the press. And Kashmiris, both Kashmiri people and professionals, do ask that question repeatedly. Now, when do they come and sort of try and understand it in a holistic and a more analytical context? And the other point I want to make...
Sorry, let me stop you there. I'll come back to you in a moment's time. Dilip Patankar, talking about that change which is happening but is not sufficient, how much of it is reflected in the way the media covers your activities as interlocutors? Is it helpful and informed, or does it simply look for stories and therefore end up misrepresenting you and your colleagues?
There are pluses and there are minuses. I think the very fact that the media everywhere in the state does take an active and lively interest in our work is a positive sign. But then we, alas, have also had examples of certain newspapers putting words in our mouth, inventing interviews that were never given, and so on and so forth. Also, I think in the early stages, the comment tended to be acerbic, but ill-informed. I think that has begun to change very gradually. But I'm still extremely grateful that the media continues to take a very lively interest in our work.
One of the things, Swapan Das Gupta, that the media did pick up on recently was the large numbers that turned up in downtown Srinagar to look for police jobs. Many of those who came had actually been pelting the police with stones just a few months or weeks earlier. Did the media, beyond expressing surprise, actually make enough of an effort to explain and understand this fairly amazing development?
See, Karan, television, with due apologies to you and everyone else, we know is quite a superficial medium. It cannot actually go into the depths of the issues. And in the case of Kashmir, nothing is really black and white. I mean, there are multiple narratives in Kashmir. To get the sheer complexity of those different narratives is always a very difficult and a daunting thing, which is really beyond the ken of television. The print media, as Waheed has rightly pointed out, has attempted and to a very large extent has been successful in understanding the different motivations. But where I would say is that there hasn't been a sufficient in-depth exploration of the politics of the whole issues. Incidents, situations are covered, but it's really the political propellers which are not sufficiently explored.
Anuradha Jamwal, would you accept what is perhaps just a hint in Swapan's answer, that the weak point of the national coverage of Kashmir is television?
By the national media?
Yes?
Yeah, it's often very prejudiced. There are a lot of biases from a Kashmir perspective, or from a Jammu and Kashmir perspective, I would say. Media tends to work within a paradigm where they think the national interest comes before objectivity. So a lot of incidents which Kashmiris which are of importance from the local point of view, there are human rights violations which are always often dwarfed as compared to incidents by armed militants.
That, I suppose, is going to have to be the note on which we end. Forgive me, we've run out of time, but you've made a very powerful point when you say that the people of Kashmir look on the national media and feel that very often things that matter to them, things that are of concern to them, are blanked out, ignored, or just minimized. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. My apologies I wasn't able to go back to Mirza Waheed as I promised I would, but we ran right out of time. Goodbye. Good night.